So my guest today knows what it's like to go through tragedy and what it's like to go through circumstances of horrific proportions. She had a young baby who had a seizure, and this led her and her family into this ordeal that really changed her life, and it changed it for the better. In her book, Baptism by Fire, Heather Choate Davis tells a story of how, as a young mother, she found courage to face the terrifying tragedy of her baby girl's brain surgery, and through it all found a renewed sense of beauty and meaning of life. It's an amazing story, one that everyone can be inspired with. Would you please welcome to the Crystal Cathedral, Heather Choate Davis. Heather, God loves you, and so do we.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
What's your daughter's name?
Her name is Remy.
And when did you first discover that there was something wrong with Remy?
When she was about 7.5 months old, my son Graham woke up early on a Sunday morning and found her having a very intense and prolonged seizure. Before that, she had been perfectly healthy, thriving, wonderful. As parents love to say, she was a little advanced for her age. There had been nothing before that, nothing technically, nothing specifically medical. But I realized once the whole ordeal began that there had been warnings, and the warnings were really in the form of, I guess you would say, a vision. Shortly after she was born, it started hitting me. It was kind of as if there was a drive-in movie hot-wired into my frontal lobe, and it would attack about once a week, always when we were very close together in our closest moments. And what I saw, just for a flash, was her head here, and then a big black pointy boot here, and it would come in and strike like this and then be gone. And I didn't know what to do with that or what to make of it. You couldn't act on that, but
Are you saying this was a spiritual vision?
I see now that it was some sort of a warning, but at the time I didn't know what to make of it. But clearly later, when it was found that what she did have was a growth on the left side right above the temple, it was something in preparation.
Wow. So, were you involved in a church at that time?
Oh, no, I was not involved in a church at that time. I was not someone who had visions. I didn't communicate with God. I didn't worship God. I had no relationship with God. If I ever said the name God out loud, there was an expletive right after it. That was, that's where I was coming from. But as these things happen, there were a few forces in our life that were leading us back to church right about that time. Very convenient. One was that I really prided myself on being a good parent. And my son was getting to be an age where you start to say, well, shouldn't I be introducing him to religion? And how do you introduce someone to religion if you don't believe it yourself? And I was really torn. I could have stuffed that down a few more years, I think, if nothing else had happened. I could have put that on the back burner. But then my son also needed a school, and the public school in the area was unacceptable. And I think I was even more afraid of sending him to a very kind of trendy or elitist private school. I had grown up going to those schools, and I had a lot of fear about what those dangers were of being in extreme wealth and privilege. So that was kind of going, and there was this wonderful little Lutheran school down the street that kept calling out to us, and I would drive by going, gosh, what about that place? What about that place? So that kind of brought us in. And then finally, Remy was born and needed to be baptized. And when I say she needed to be baptized, it wasn't really a religious thing. It was more like, symbolic, kind of a coming out party for a new baby, that type of thing. So those things led us to go into the church that I said was the church connected to the school, where Graham was going to go. And we had been to services 3 or 4 times before the seizure.
And that was basically your church connection 3 or 4 times, and wanting to get the child baptized and thinking that this might be the perfect school for you.
Right.
So how did things progress with Remy then?
Well, right after she was taken to the hospital, we started having all the different tests and blood tests and scans and what have you, and it was determined she had a mass in her brain that they thought was going to have to be removed surgically. But there was still this possibility that it was this very rare kind of growth from something viral. And so that was kind of a red herring in the whole ordeal, and it took a while before we could determine that it just had to be removed. The thing that was the blessing of the red herring of was it this strange virus is that during that time, I had to be trained to administer IV medications at home, which is not something I had any natural skill or ability for. And the fact of doing this repetitive task again and again, where the stakes were so high if you did it wrong.
Yes.
And it was so difficult and not up my alley. I was not a nurse, you know, I can turn a phrase, but I can't do things with my hands. And I think it was very, very humbling, and I think it was the way God broke me. He just wore me down. And I think that's the process.
So what happened to you personally through all these things?
Well, I think that it's really anybody's journey of faith, whether it happens over 6 minutes or 60 years. I mean, for me, it was kind of 6 weeks. It was a breaking away of the ego. It was the being willing to say, gosh, no, I don't have all the answers. I'm not in charge. I mean, that was my life. My life was, here I come. You know, I've got it. I'm in control. I'm leading this ship. And it was realizing that I wasn't in control and that nothing that I held dear or true could be counted on. And I didn't have the answers. And you get to a point where I think you are so broken down emotionally and spiritually and every other way, physically, that it's not only a relief to say, you know, okay, I can't do it. You just say, all right, you know, take me. You're in charge now. I give up. You know, you win. So I think that's what it was for me. And from that moment forward, everything got easier. Everything got easier.
In AA, they say that a person changes only when they reach their bottom.
Oh, I think so.
And was that your bottom then?
Oh, yeah. I think there was just a moment in the process where I just knew I couldn't go on. And I just said, take me, God, you know, and after that, it was all a blessing. Not only through the rest of the time where we waited for the surgery, in terms of the grace that I felt and the light and the gifts from people helping us and everything just being so much more manageable, you know, but ever since then, every element of my life now bears fruit, when before it was just a lot of, you know, banging into walls,
So how old was she when you discovered the tumor?
She was 7.5 months. The surgery happened right before she turned 9 months, and perfectly successful. She's now healthy, happy, totally normal. When this book came out, people who knew her and went to school with her said, "What dark hour? What are you talking about?" No one knew anything was wrong, and I'm very, very blessed.
So she's here with us in the congregation today?
Oh, yes. May I introduce them?
Yes, please.
My husband, Lon, and my son, Graham, who the book is dedicated to, and my daughter, Remy.
So you used to distrust religion, is that true?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm really typical in that generation in that way. Yeah.
So how do you view the church today?
Can I read something from the end of the book? I think that will
Sure.
say it the best. This is something, the very end, and this moment in the book takes place right after Remy was baptized, which was exactly a month to the day after her surgery, and she'd come out, and we were returning kind of into the congregation right after the baptism, and it says this: I moved out through the congregation, through the wide-eyed children who had prayed for the baby with a problem in her brain every Wednesday in chapel and wanted now to hold her. I was approached by new mothers who looked both delighted and wary, and aging men who had done their time in hospital waiting rooms. I was embraced by ladies born into a generation of service who, without ties or hesitation, sent us cards and casseroles and Jell-O jigglers for Graham, and I was grateful to have a place in all of their lives. Church, as I have been blessed to discover, is not boot camp. It's a place to practice being a human being.
God loves you, Heather.
Thank you very much.
And so do we.